made it to level 100. That was a great battle pass.
Said no one ever.
The battle pass. If you've played any competitive game in the last 5 years or so, you've probably seen this before. That tantalizing array of rewards that promise hours of gameplay challenges and content for you to enjoy. But at what cost? It's more than just $10. What if I told you that battle passes are actually a symptom of something far greater that is changing the entire landscape of video games as we know them? Well, today we're going to do a deep dive on the Battle Pass. We're looking at its origins, the Battle Pass's evolving design, and what it's doing to us as players psychologically. My name's Max Neal, and this is Voxel. The history of the Battle Pass begins in 2013 with Dota 2, and it all started with really positive intentions. In the lead up to the third annual Dota 2 International, that's Dota's annual pro tournament, Valve introduced the Interactive Compendium, an optional paid ticket that players could buy that would, in part, be used to fund the prize pool for the tournament. Players could purchase their compendium for $10, and it would unlock a bunch of different features in the game as the community collectively reached various funding goals. 25% of compendium sales over the next 3 months would go towards the prize pool for the International held later that year. And actually, that's really cool. I love to see community-focused events in games, and while, sure, Valve was making a profit from the compendium, the idea to use it to fund the game's biggest pro tournament was groundbreaking in more ways than one. Sales of the compendium pushed the 2013 International's prize pool from $1.6 million up to $2.8 million. That's nearly as much as the pool from the 2 prior years combined. But it was in 2014 that the idea of the Battle Pass as we know it today was created, and it ended up more successful than perhaps anyone ever could have imagined. Valve had obviously hit on something big with the creation of the compendium, but the rewards that players could earn were largely in the hands of other players. In 2013, the Dota 2 community actually came short of the compendium's final community reward, and that doesn't really feel good. So in 2014, Valve brought the compendium back, this time with a new twist. Owners of the 2014 compendium received rewards as community goals were reached, just like the years prior, but players could also level up their compendium by watching and predicting the outcome of matches during the International, and by completing various challenges inside of Dota 2. Sales of the 2014 compendium reached over $10 million. This was not only a major turning point for the legitimacy of professional esports leagues, but also perhaps the biggest impetus for the future of corporate investment in video games. On the monetary side, the price of video games has stayed largely the same over the last 17 years. It's only really changed recently, while the cost and complexity of developing games has nearly quintupled. To make up the gap, some studios have turned to aggressive microtransactions and battle passes as a core revenue model for some games. And if I can be blunt, it's gone too far. We are witnessing the profitization of the video game industry in real time, where the ultimate goal of investors is to monetize the most enjoyable events in gaming, like getting sweet loot, to take that experience out of the game itself, and to make you choose between playing any of the other exciting games that are coming out this year, or to grind one game for hundreds of hours just to get your money's worth. Since 2014, we have seen hundreds of versions of the Battle Pass. It's a concept that has weaseled its way into nearly every high-budget competitive game released today. And it's made way for a whole new subgenre of video games, the live service game. And that in itself would be fine if the spirit of the Battle Pass hadn't been entirely corrupted by corporate greed, like some kind of Battle Pass anti-form.
But Sora, I thought you liked games.
Bruh.
The Battle Pass as a concept is actually quite excellent for multiplayer games. One of the most important struggles for a competitive game is to foster a healthy player base, and Battle Passes can provide an incentive for players to log in and play every once in a while. But rarely is playing 1 or 2 matches a day actually enough to complete a 100-level Battle Pass season. Instead, Battle Passes seem designed to monopolize your time and keep you from playing literally any other game. It is the capitalist's dream, if you think about it, to create a product that is so addictive that its users won't think to try anything else. But maybe not addictive enough that it gets banned from TV and billboards or across entire countries in Europe.
Sure is a swell new box.
I'm going to say up front that I think game companies deserve to make money. Making video games is a business just as much as it is a passion for hundreds of thousands of programmers and artists and really talented people. This incredible hobby only exists because studios are able to pay their employees. And while salaries in the video game industry aren't always something to write home about, they can earn someone a living wage to do what they love to do. Just like you can help us earn a living wage by subscribing to the channel and checking out our Patreon over at patreon.com/voxelshow. If you're part of the generation watching that grew up with always online games and microtransaction locked cosmetics, then you might not understand why the advent of battle passes drove me to write a 6,000-word essay about the topic. It's because it didn't always used to be this way. I'm someone who loves to live in the fantasy of video game worlds, and to me, that means cool-ass loot, sweet weapons, and massive f***ing shoulder pads. I want to go delving into caves and fight some big-ass crab and use his claw to crush. I want to show up to Durotar in my skimpy little Orkini and come back 60 levels later looking like I belong in the Gargoyles TV show. And I want it to make sense. I want to earn the gear that I wear in the game because earning it tells a story. The biggest issue I have with Battle Pass systems is that they take player rewards out of the game and they put them on a meta layer of gameplay. That you earn the best rewards only by playing the game for longer periods of time. How long we play a game doesn't necessarily correlate to how fun the game is. But Battle Passes take the implicit stance that you only deserve rewards if you play and pay for longer. It's irrelevant how fun that experience is or how much it challenges you, and this leads to downright lazy game design. As investors dig their hands deeper and deeper into the games industry, the question is starting to arise in publishing and developer teams. Why create games that leave a lasting impact on players when it would be more profitable to create games that abuse our human psychology and keep us playing the game for hours more for a carrot that is dangled further and further out of our reach? But when I look back at the games I used to play, they're so different. I look like a sci-fi samurai in Halo because my friends and I fought tooth and claw through legendary difficulty for 13 hidden skulls. The angel and devil Chow in my Chow Garden, I raised them through the blood, sweat, and tears of hours of gameplay. I had to send my WoW raid group to dance lessons, and I earned that armor because I made Sire Denathrius my bitch. Not because I hit some arbitrary level of my Season 14 Premium Battle Pass. You are playing a game. And in the game, you're a Spartan, not a consumer. Your seasonal battle pass shouldn't make you feel like Jack Bauer on an episode of 24 trying to eke out level 100 at the last minute. You should be hanging out and having fun. You shouldn't be yoinking 100 boinks for 300 XP. You should be doing it for the Boink Yoinker 5000. Am I making any sense here?
Looks like someone's trying to corrupt the internet.
Battle passes are starting to turn playing games for the fun of exploration and competition and achievement into playing the game for value. How many times have you played one more match of Fortnite? Not because you wanted to push and improve your skills, but because you're so close to that next level of your battle pass. That motivation is driven by our perceived value of the reward at the end of the tunnel, a reward that you have paid for the chance to earn. If you were never to play another match of Fortnite again, that reward would be out of your reach forever. So despite the fact that you haven't finished your bio paper that's due tomorrow, you better sneak in one more match. It's worth it, right? This is the fundamental difference between player-focused design and investor-focused design. And we see increasing examples of it illustrated every single day. These days, the coolest armor in almost any live service game is inevitably locked behind the Battle Pass or the cash shop. And it's because publishers know that that's what you want. You want the feeling of prestige. You want the feeling to show off what you've accomplished. Or maybe the skin just elevates your experience. If you've ever purchased a skin from a cash shop and then been berated by your friends about it, you know that just owning a paid skin doesn't necessarily make you feel good.
Over the past couple of months, I've repeatedly heard the term that desktop Linux development is slow. But what the heck does that even mean? Linux for workstations has always seemed to be behind competing operating systems like Windows, macOS, or even Android. But is that actually true? And furthermore, is Linux even competing with these platforms? What makes development seem so slow? And is it even true? Make sure that you press that like and subscribe button so you don't miss out on any future videos, and we're off. Linux, especially for people who've never heard of it before, is something that only seems half-baked. For once, since its distributions aren't really advertised, it seems like a niche product with lots of missing applications and complicated console commands. And secondly, it just can't keep up. Or does it? Developing an operating system is hard, and what's even harder is to keep up with constantly changing trends that will continue to reel in new customers. I mean, just look at Windows, Google and Apple for example. If someone decides to change their design, then suddenly the whole industry is moving towards it. If you're too slow, then you suddenly feel too old and no one cares anymore. But here we already run into our first issue. On Linux, you have choice. There are many so-called desktop environments, which are vastly different from each other and can be customized to one's liking. Some of them are even based on some. But the thing is that most developers of these desktop environments don't really steer into the direction of new trends. They already know what they like, and if their user base wants something new, then they can just go and install something else. But that being said, even if a desktop environment seems like its development is slow because it doesn't change rapidly, there is a certain truth to it. There are many, and in my opinion even necessary features that are still not implemented yet. For example, a feature that is missing from literally every single desktop environment I've tried so far is adjusting bit rates and audio depth of audio devices. And while yes, this is technically not a Linux issue, since you can change its configuration, it is something that is missing from desktop Linux. A good graphical user interface is essential for good usability. But how do you design something like that? How is usability defined? Well, it depends. Some would say that good usability is only achieved if the user does not need to look up anything. Everything is clear right from the start. Others would not really agree that easily, since if you were to develop a complex application with lots of settings, then guiding the user through everything just takes up way too much time. So it's not good usability then. What you need to find is a balance. And it's exactly that balance that is off on many distros and desktop environments. KDE and GNOME, for example, introduce many changes with each new release. And yet, since version 3, GNOME didn't really seem to change all that much. It's like I said, slow. But we shouldn't let that blind us, because there are definitely things that do need to change. Let's talk about redundancies, because these are actually slowing down development. X11 and Wayland, for example, both are protocols that serve the purpose to display graphics on your screen. X11 is the old reliable option, but it has a lot of limitations and old dependencies. For example, multi-monitor setups are being handled as one big screen. If the refresh rates are different, then which one is the united screen supposed to have? Wayland, on the other hand, is the new deal. It fixes a lot of issues that X11 has. However, its more secure approach is limiting a lot of functionality. For example, it is not possible to share your screen via Discord or OBS if you don't have Pipewire or a similar additional application. And the same issues also apply to audio solutions. But that leaves us with a big controversial problem, because Linux is about choice. And no, I'm not suggesting that all distributions should just choose one solution and go with that. Because then we would just get the Windows and Apple experience, just open source. Sure, a unified way to handle audio and video on Linux would be nice to have, but we would lose the thing that makes it so amazing: choice. Now I'm still not defending some very obvious choices that keep getting postponed. Tearing in Wayland for lower latencies? Still not fully implemented yet. Waiting for HDR support? Also slow, but it's finally happening. Big thanks to Valve at this point, who are really helping us in that regard. So, what are my thoughts on this matter? I agree that some features take a very long time on Linux. But I can't really complain much about the rest. Linux development is not slow, since a lot of new things get implemented in the backend and might not be visible to the end user, but those optimizations are still there. Be aware that because of that, Linux continues to be more lightweight than Windows. If they were to release features just because they can, then it would just become as or maybe even more bloated than Windows already is. So is it already better than proprietary operating systems? Well, there is no real answer for that, because it heavily depends on the distro and the use case. Windows is something for everyone. Apple is more designated to workstations, and Linux can be whatever you want it to be, while also offering the choice to remove unwanted stuff. Sure, it has many problems, and I'm not going to deny that. But honestly, nowadays I trust it enough that it can be used by everyone once they manage to install it. And that's where I'll leave it. So if you've liked this video, then please make sure to show it by hitting that like button, and while you're at it, also subscribe to the channel. If you're interested in more content like this, then you should definitely check out my channel. Here, I'll even get you started. And all that's left to say now is good morning, good afternoon or good evening, wherever you are. I'll see you around.
So in the world of long-running franchises, I've seen a lot of discussion around nostalgia baiting. Our nostalgia is being repackaged and sold back to us. It seems like nowadays corporations are starting to prey on the nostalgia of their audiences in order to make bank on reproducing the same old content, or by giving us low-quality products that's
Pokemon is a Japanese media franchise, including my own. Simulators look really cool, but for me, the highlight of character design in this game is Team Starfall. The first member that you should fight, of course it's up to you in what order you go into, is Giacomo. Am I saying that right? Giacomo? Yeah, something like that. He makes music, and you can tell because he's always holding his laptop and he has at least one headphone on. In the lore, or whatever, he created the Starfall theme, which is pretty interesting because that means that each character adds something to their idea. It's not just something that us as the player hears this. This is at least canon. Next up is Mela. She's the fire type leader, and she has a kind of snarky attitude, but all in all, she's pretty nice. She has a large choker, belt, and massive boots that she can't even walk in. Atticus is the next one. He's supposed to be the poison type ninja, but the only odd thing is that it doesn't really seem to match his character. He talks like he's in D&D club, but he has this whole ninja theme. Maybe I'm just looking too far into it. It's also explained in the lore that Atticus designed all of the Team Starfall outfits. His whole area is also super cool, as it's called Tag Tree Thicket. It's covered in graffiti, and there's bright colors everywhere, kind of like poisonous frogs. Ortega is the fairy-type Starfall leader. He's dressed quite dapper, which goes with his story because apparently he's a transfer student from Kalos. Kalos in the Pokemon universe is basically France. His parents are clothes designers, and you can see this in his, design. And finally, we have Aerie. She has this white rock star-esque outfit as well as this striking face paint. She's the fighting type Starfall leader, and by far she is the most difficult battle that I had to deal with in the game, which made it more fun. Her team is really interesting, and it goes with her whole theme of, being a fighter. The area that she's in is also a bamboo sort of meditation area where a lot of fighting type Pokemon spawn, so it goes with the whole idea of, a fighting theme. I forgot to mention this before, but Ortega's area is also kind of with his fairy theme. It's this nice prairie, flower field grassland, which is right at the end of this icy, snowy mountain. It's really pretty, and there's flower petals everywhere. It really goes with the theme. The other characters in this game that also have great character design, being gym leaders, this leads us into the negatives. Yeah, this game has a lot of them, so get comfy. Though the gym leaders look cool, they are the highlight of all the gyms, not even the battles, the gyms themselves, or anything else surrounding the gym. Every gym has this, puzzle, I guess you could say, but it's not even difficult. It just feels like a baby trying to put all the shapes into the square-shaped hole. It's so easy. The very first one that you should go to is the bug-type area, in which you have this massive inflated olive, and you bring it to the basket. And you can fight somebody there, but you don't even have to. There's no point. Now, Pokemon has set great expectations for gyms. Look no further than previous games. These gyms have really unique puzzles that are pretty difficult to figure out, as well as necessary trainer battles for the most part, unless you figure out a way to avoid them. These trainer battles really help see if you were prepared to even fight this gym, and all of these characters had Pokemon of the same typing. It made the whole gym less of a final battle and more of an entire experience. It was really fun, and this game doesn't have that. It has a pretty simple, dumb mini-game, and then you fight the gym leader. In the gyms, there's nothing to do there. The gyms look awful. They're the exact same copy and paste building and the exact same copy and paste room that you enter, which is just a secretary, you talk to them, and you have a battle. Sure, there's the battlefield in every single area, but most of them are kind of okay. The only one that I found that was interesting and that I thought was memorable was the one in Levincia with Ayano. Of course, she's the best gym leader, but it's like its own stage. You have this whole audience around you. The other one with Rhyme is also, compelling and interesting, but it's just a stage. With the problem with these gyms not even being that compelling, the towns there that are meant to harbor them have barely anything happening. The only one that has As something different is Medali, which has the Treasure Eatery, which is basically just the gym and the battlefield. It is by far the most unique out of all of them.
When I was a kid, we didn't have a lot of money to buy games, so we rented. We didn't have a lot of money to rent games often, so I'd conveniently forget to remind my parents about return dates, then get chewed out about late fees a couple of days later. Time constraints I had as a child when it came to playing games sparked a very early obsession with finishing them. Before the 5-day period was up, I had to beat that game. I needed to get all the secrets. I needed to make sure I could keep up with the kids at school. I couldn't lose to Lewis and his uncle at Nintendo, telling him how to unlock Dragon Kazooie. Cheating scumbag. High school was different. I didn't have a lot of money to buy games, so I pirated them. We didn't have a lot of bandwidth back then, so I'd conveniently pretend not to know why the internet was acting so slow, then get chewed out by my brother a few days later. The resource constraints and misunderstanding of ethical pirating I had as a teenager when it came to playing games sparked an adolescent obsession with finishing them. Because any game would take a week to download, I had to beat that game. I needed to get all the secrets. I needed to make sure I was in the know with my friends at school and on Skype. I couldn't risk getting spoiled on the new Mass Effect or be the one person in the call everyone had to dance around spoilers for. I needed to make sure I was caught up so I could watch those videos on the games I wanted to play. I wanted to be included. I wanted to belong. College was a super different story. I had money to buy games, and after an entire childhood of not being able to, took a victory lap through the 3 GameStops in my hometown. I didn't really leave a lot in my bank account those days, so I'd conveniently tell myself it was only another week until my next paycheck, and chewed myself out when the bills came around later. The buyer's remorse I had as a college kid sparked a deep-seated obsession with finishing games. I bought these games, and I needed to squeeze every dollar out of them. Because they burned a huge hole in my wallet, I had to beat those games. I needed to make sure I didn't spend my money for no reason. I couldn't bear to look at my shelf of games and see this huge backlog of frivolous spending. I couldn't stand the idea of my friends making fun of me for it. I wanted to validate myself. I wanted to prove my purchases had a purpose. Oh, but doing YouTube videos? Incredibly different situation. I had money, I had drive, I had passion. I wanted to talk about all kinds of thoughts and opinions I had on games. I didn't have a lot of time on my hands, so I'd conveniently forget to do my homework and ignore my regimen, then mentally self-destruct later. The desperate need for approval I had as an adult sparked a consuming obsession with finishing games. Before I could talk about it in a thoughtful, powerful way, I had to beat that game. I needed to scour for every detail. I needed to make my writing so airtight, so on the mark, no one was going to make fun of me. I had to stay ahead of the curve to be the trendsetter I wanted to be. And year after year, with every failure to accomplish what I had set out to do at every stage of my life playing these games, my obsession would turn to guilt. Because if I didn't finish the game, what was the point of spending all this time on it? The money, the bandwidth, the denial. How could I run a successful YouTube channel if I wasn't covering the newest game within a week of it coming out? How could I call myself a fan of these series or talk to my friends about games if I never finished them? How could I justify the thousands of dollars I'd spent on my digital library if I hadn't touched more than half of it? What was the point? What was my motive? Why can't I stop feeling this way? So eventually, one existential crisis after another, you start learning a lot about yourself. The differences between who you are naturally and external factors contributing to who you've become. I've done a lot of thinking, figured some of it out. If you've ever experienced something like those scenarios from my own life, I have something important to tell you. You don't need to finish that game. Game completion is so obsessed about nowadays. People gatekeep and invalidate each other's opinions based on how far they made it while playing them. Being up to date on a long-running series seems to be more important than caring about its trajectory, its quality, and the conditions it was made in. People are so afraid of missing out on the real impact of a sequel, they'll prevent themselves from playing it until they beat the games leading up to it. We're so desperate to be a part of the wave, we're insistent on buying the new thing and beating it as fast as possible so that we're riding at the very top. And the truth is, this is a reality we didn't necessarily force ourselves into. It's not the nature of recreation, it's the nature of business. I get the feeling my childhood wasn't unique. Even if you didn't rent games, I'm willing to bet your parents or whoever bought you video games weren't gung-ho about it. Even if they loved games themselves, they were also hopefully thinking about other aspects of your development, so what you had to play was what you had to play. From a very young age, we're taught video games need to be finished before we deserve to have another one. Or, in the case of renting, there's a finite amount of time we have with this game, and our limited understanding is we may never see it again when the time is up. It's probably why kids are so good at video games. Beating games was our job, and by doing it well, we'd be rewarded with more of them. And school was where we could show our efforts off. Knowing more about a video game than someone else when you're 10 years old is like being Christ reborn in the minds of other children. It makes you the center of attention for a week until the rest of them catch up to you and you raise them onto Mount Olympus, welcoming them as your fellow gods. The nice lesson our parents were teaching us about valuing our possessions also reinforced this idea we were getting at school that beating games was cool. Like Sunny D in the fridge and McDonald's everyday cool. If there's one thing I know the games industry is good at, it's finding ways to turn children and teens into loyal consumers. In the late 90s, early aughts when I was a kid, and yes, I am nearly 30, looks can be deceiving, game companies were already capitalizing on the way I played games. Games with obtuse progression, games with secret levels and new things to discover, and games too big to finish in a rental period were their bread and butter. These were ways to keep players renting or convince them to just buy, and the mascot generation did a lot to get kids to beg their parents to buy them the new Crash Bandicoot or the new Spyro or the next Banjo-Tooie, and no, I don't want to rent it, I know I'm going to like it. But what I don't think they expected was for the kids to dangle what they knew in front of each other's faces, to use the fact they had games and knew a lot about them as a form of social status. Or maybe they did.
Now get Nintendo Power 12 times a year! 6 great issues plus 6 free strategy guides on a hot new game! That's twice the power for still $15! Wow, call now!
This is Timmy. Timmy knows how to get the coolest, newest video games first. But now, someone else is as cool as Timmy. You! Tune into the Sega channel and play just released games until midnight the next day.
Beating games wasn't just cool, brand loyalty and brand consumption was cool. We were either Nintendo or Sega kids, or Nintendo or PlayStation kids, and if you're a little younger, either Xbox 360 or PlayStation 3 kids. You'd think people would grow out of those childlike conceptions, but teenage adolescence has a funny way of making us feel a lot smarter without doing much of anything different. As we got older, the words used may have changed, but it was the same dynamic. My teenage years were when the console wars became a monolith. The advent of the internet paired with one of the most popular console generations of all time really brought it out of people. Well, game companies learning about internet marketing really brought it out of people. And whether or not you were a willing participant, you were in it. Most of us only had one current gen console, an Xbox 360 or a PS3, and the Wii probably. If you had all three, chances are you were an outlier, but therein lied the social hierarchy. When you're a teenager, you want to be a part of everything. You're learning about yourself, you're trying and feeling lots of new things, and if there's something people are doing you don't have access to, you start to feel like you're missing out. You lose the sense of belonging in your social circles when all of your friends are talking about a game you haven't played yet, or when everyone's getting on Xbox Live to play Gears 3's Horde mode, but you don't have it. Online multiplayer itself feels like this distant place where everyone else is having a new kind of fun you can't afford to maintain. Sometimes it was so integral to the stability of your friendships that not playing the same games as your friends meant you weren't hanging out with them anymore. Not on purpose, just by circumstance. It might not seem like this was all about beating the game per se, but remember where these feelings developed from? This panic you'd lose your credibility if you didn't know what happens, this desire to be included in what was being talked about. Video games were a fad, and the internet shortened the lifespan of how long those fads would be in style. If you didn't beat Red Dead Redemption in the 2 weeks it came out, your friends were already moving on to something else. Your window for being included in a discussion closed. It wasn't in the fairy tale high school bully kind of way, but beating games had gone from making you cool to being accepted. Is it hard to believe the industry would capitalize on its biggest demographic's worst anxiety? Limited editions, pre-order bonuses, DLCs extending the story, or in some cases providing the ending to the base game story. Online functions at a monthly premium, season passes guaranteeing you won't miss out on future developments, utilizing underhanded methods of making pre-owned copies of games impossible to use. It became harder and harder to keep up with the rest of the community if you weren't buying the new release and tunneling through it for the sake of being part of it. Even now, feeling like I'm missing out on a game my friends love convinces me to buy games without a second thought, compounding into a sunk cost fallacy I've built up since high school. I think there's a scientific study waiting to prove video game backlogs begin at around the same time a video game enthusiast gets their first job. And maybe you want to make it up to your younger self and fulfill a desire which was never indulged. Maybe you're like me and bought every game you pirated as a kid to justify your own conscience. Or maybe, like many of us, you practice retail therapy and get yourself something you like when you're going through a rough time. Then you realize you've spent hundreds or thousands of dollars on a huge list of games you kept assuring yourself you'd definitely play. And so your backlog and the sunk cost fallacy attached to it is born. Beating games isn't your job anymore though. Playing games is what you do in your free time or in between class and work. In other words, you can't devote an entire week to them without taking a few days off from, well, everything. But what's the point in buying and playing games if you don't beat them, right? It's like losing out on an investment or something, because that's totally what I'm doing. A game is an investment, I think, because if I beat it, I can move on to the next one. If you ask me, the presence of a backlog implies we've never grown out of our childhood habits. We've found ways to add importance to something which should have never mattered in the first place. Our money-driven society taught us to play games, we have to beat games. Once we start to understand how expensive our hobby is, suddenly we're measuring cost versus experience and seeking to maximize our profits by milking the game for everything it's worth. And if we don't, well, that's our fault. We made a bad investment, something didn't hold us long enough, and now it's money wasted. It's not though. You paid money to play a game and you played it. You enjoyed something until you were tired of it. That's normal. No one expects you to cash optimize how you go bowling, and quite frankly, I'll crack you over the head with my ball if you try to rush me. And likewise, there shouldn't be an expectation to beat a game just because you spent money on it. Yet, some of us still push through a game we don't like and feel awful doing it just to knock it off the list. You better believe the industry took advantage of this mindset too. The last decade has been 10 years of re-releasing old games, creating monthly subscriptions for instant access to your very own backlog, and massive sales to drive up purchases. It's seen games as a service become a popular way of keeping players invested and begrudgingly getting through bad content to get to new content. It's seen digital storefronts compete with launch window discounts and the growth of the sketchy gray market where people can make haphazard additions to their libraries. It's seen game design philosophy change to cater to a completionist mindset and focus on keeping players busy long enough to void refund periods. It's required the redefinition of a refund to protect consumers in however small a way it does. The pride, the need for acceptance, and now a misplaced urge to be responsible. We've attached so many odd values to an insignificant part of playing games the industry has, with every breath reinforced and ingrained into the culture of gaming. God, I hate that I just said that itself. But playing games isn't about increasing our net worth, literally or figuratively. Playing games is supposed to be a relaxing or invigorating experience for however long it remains so. If a 200-hour RPG doesn't keep me invested for its entire length, that's fine. Maybe it says something about how I feel towards the game itself, but not me. It doesn't make me that kind of person. Finishing a game isn't even important to understand.
By Azura, by Azura, by Azura! It's the grand champion! I can't believe it's you standing here, molesting me.
Drive is a movie in which Ryan Gosling drives.
I drive?
Based on James Salas's novel with the same name, which you should probably read and maybe stop staring at your monitor and take a shower. Drive tells the tale of a professional stuntsman that happens to be very good in driving. So naturally, he takes advantage of his skills and makes some extra money as a getaway driver, until one night he bites off more than he could chew. What makes this movie special is that one day, 98% of human species woke up and decided Ryan Gosling wearing driving gloves is literally them.
Grenade!
Of course, this is merely a myth, because as we all know, I am the real Ryan Gosling, and I can prove it to you. Here's a picture of Ryan Gosling, and here's a picture of me. Can you spot a single difference? Of course not, so let's close this discussion. Drive is one of those movies that you watch once and end up adapting the personality of the protagonist because he is mysterious, thinking that's what's gonna get you laid. And you know your boy, I strongly believe that video games can be much more impactful than movies. So I opened a case to find a game that has the most resemblance of the movie Drive. At first, it seemed like an easy task. Apparently, people did investigate this topic before and they made a long list of recommendations, so bye. Just kidding. Sure, there's a lot of suggestions, but so far, no definite answer was given to the question of what game resembles the movie Drive. So I put my gloves on, stole my ex's car, and started the search myself. Of course, when we think of Drive, naturally Hotline Miami comes to mind. Once again, starring a protagonist that is just literally me. Since the game was inspired by Drive, it makes sense why they both give similar vibes. You can even find the famous Scorpion jacket in the game. But that would be too easy. Hotline Miami isn't resemblant of Drive in any way. say, someone watched a hotel scene and thought, yes, this one scene needs to be its own game. I was looking for something a little bit more accurate, so I decided to skip and find the famous Scorpion jacket in the game. But that would be too easy. Hotline Miami isn't resemblant of Drive in any way. Someone watched a hotel scene and thought, yes, this one scene needs to be its own game. I was looking for something a little bit more accurate, so I decided to skim through the recommendations personally. The first and the most interesting suggestion was Payday. Oh no, no, not again. No, not a Payday video. Please make it stop. Please, please.
So you just moved to LA?
No, I've been here for a while.
This is gonna be a weird one, gang.
There's some guys that want me to do a job for them. I got the driver. Somebody call Nino. What'd you do with the cash?
It's time to move on. One of the most recommended titles was a visual novel named Neocap. For those of you who are unfamiliar, though visual novels classify as video games, they technically aren't. They are more like motion books, usually played to a mild background music. A familiar example would be the Ace Attorney series. Neocap starts off looking like those adult games all of us own but hide on Steam. The art style was fairly interesting, a futuristic palette with a combination of 2D and 3D modeling. You play as a young cab driver named Lena, who decided to try Neocap to at least doesn't want to. If Lena doesn't want to say something, you can't choose it. Why the So I just had to give it a good name. The structure does convey the same vibe. I read so at some point the game was already racing with just racing. It had a genuine storyline. I just wish I could give them to study anything had, okay? Perform literally every game mechanic, which you won't even use most of them, by the way, without any instructions. If you do manage to make it to the actual game, you're in for a treat. Non-stop adrenaline pumping chases that just never gets old. This game seemed to be the answer I was looking for, but because of technology limitations, there's little to this time around. They're actually man, the sun in this game is so strong, it's absorbing my skin. Okay, let's drive. I must say, Driver 4 doesn't even know why it exists. The story fails miserably to make you invested, and you'll most likely just end up running YouTube in the background to keep your attention span. Missions offer little variety, which makes the game very boring, and even those few missions seem to randomly decide whether they want to be so hard they're literally unbeatable, or so easy you can do them with your eyes closed. But what gets me the most is the shooting missions. I don't even know where to begin. You have auto-aim, which means shooting requires no skill at all. Your weapons seem to have infinite ammo, and your gun just doesn't exist. This is not a rare occurrence. I never came across a shooting section where the gun actually was visible. This whole game feels like you bought GTA from Wish. What a waste. Driver 4 started off looking exactly like what I wanted, but with each second it got worse. But we aren't done yet. There's still one more driver game we got in game. We switch back to Age, switch to Oncoming and Crash. We drive. The Driver franchise is our best bet, but each of the installments is missing a crucial element. So whichever one you prefer is really just a matter of